When do you want for you as an in an e-commerce business with your family, would you like that customer to make their buying decision at the time of checkout? Or would you like them to make that buying decision when they see what the duty and tax bill is going to be when your product's already in the other country?
Why did the import duty break up with its girlfriend?
I don't know. Why?
It found out she was terrified of commitment.
Ba-da-ba.
Okay. Hey, welcome to the Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast by Zonos. And today you have the two co-hosts, myself, Clint Reid, along here with Aaron Bezzant.
Welcome. It's good to be here.
Welcome, Aaron.
Yeah.
So last time we talked about a subject that was, most people dismiss, right? Because it doesn't happen that often. So they just kind of don't deal with it much, which is de minimis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Today, I think we need to just talk about what does landed cost, like understanding what duty, taxes, and all that makes up. How do you feel about that?
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
That sounds good to me. I mean, really, de minimis was an important part of landed cost, but I'd love to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk through landed cost in general and why it's so important in e-commerce.
Why is it called landed? Why is it a landed cost?
Easiest way for me to think of it is I like to think of a package landing on my doorstep after I've ordered it online, and all the costs are paid when it finally hits my doorstep.
Well, that makes sense to me. I mean, it's I think the term landed though comes probably derives from the actual landing in country is kind of how I imagine it. Because this is a term that comes from the I guess the supply chain, freight forwarding, ocean container type movements. And what's the landed cost? Because a lot of times you might be paying those duties and taxes when it arrives. Let's say that you're a buyer of, you're importing a container into the U.S. of, let's say, some type of good, and you have to pay import tariffs on that. So what's it going to be landed, right? Because if you don't know what it's going to be landed, you might be surprised, and that's been a problem in supply chain and for a very long time. So why is that a problem with e-commerce?
Well, in e-commerce, I like to, it's dealing with the same problems, right? Of packages moving across border and costs being incurred on those packages. But the customer is a little bit different. Historically, businesses have been selling to each other on container ships and, in large quantities to be cleared through customs, duties and taxes paid, and then a business is reselling them locally. And when a consumer's buying, all that stuff, all that complexity has already been taken care of by that business that they're buying from. And so they're usually just dealing with sales tax or really when they go to check out at the register at a local store, it's everything's paid for. They're done. They take it home, and what they paid at the register is all they pay. In e-commerce, what's happening though is in the last 25 or so years, e-commerce has really taken off, and the cross-border side of it's really grown dramatically. But what that does is when an e-commerce shopper buys from a retailer in another country, those complexities of cross-border clearance, duty and tax, all those costs kind of get pushed onto them to where they're now the one bringing the goods into their country and are responsible to pay those. And sometimes they're a lot different than what they expect.
Well, to kind of, when you talk about the complexities, right, that are kind of covered when I want to kind of go back to that example of a, let's say, okay, I was talking the other day with a business owner that was importing. Look, we deal with e-commerce, but he's like, hey, Clint, I'm importing prefabricated homes from China. Any idea? Is there anything I need to worry about here with duties and taxes or whatever? I said, let's look into it. So he had, he has to have a broker, right, to bring this in, and then he's working with the manufacturer in China, and the manufacturer's like, oh no, you don't need to worry about it. We're just going to keep the invoice value low for you. And I think maybe he thought, okay, the duty on this is 2.5%. And, I went back with the team. I'm like, no, man, this is like 27% duty because there was a countervailing duty. And I think it was countervailing or, for imported items come from China, additional 25% on top of the duty amount. And so this is just on this is one order and the amount of time and effort to figure out is this going to cost? And you know what? I guess the ROI is worth it though, right? Bringing in, let's say, $40,000 worth of goods from China. I can afford probably to have my, broker spend some time on it or maybe do a little bit of investigation and pay someone to help me out to figure this out because I want to take on that complexity, like you were saying, because when I sell this in the US, I need to know what that total landed cost is so that I can then sell it at the right price point where it's just inclusive of all of these costs when it comes in. Now imagine that in e-commerce, this was one country going to one country, one good going to one country. When we're dealing with, at Zonos, we deal with e-commerce retailers that are selling to hundreds, let's say 150, 200 destinations, and they have to take this complexity and figure it out real time and not get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not to mention in e-commerce, when you fill out your cart and go to checkout, a lot of times you might be buying lots of different products. Or as an e-commerce retailer, you've got some of our customers have hundreds of thousands of SKUs that range from all over the place as far as the types of products, as well as where those products are made, et cetera. So it definitely compounds a problem versus the one large shipment working with some experts to figure it out. Away you go. But now it's lots of products going to lots of countries, and it gets pretty complex really fast.
So if you needed to add up, what is landed cost? What are the things that are going into that amount?
I'd say 3 main buckets you could put it in would be duties, taxes, fees.
And then shipping and items is usually part of the
that would be
the technical part of the total landed cost. How much is the shipping? How much is the items? Which we're not going to get into here. But the duty, the tax, the fees. So maybe we can dive into each one of these a little bit, and then also just a little bit. I think that we need a whole episode to talk about duty. We need an entire episode to talk about tax, and also just about fees. But high level, what is? Let's start with maybe the easiest one. What's tax in this case? When you're trying to calculate tax all over the world.
Sales tax, right? That's what it comes down to. You've got different types of tax depending on the country, but it's really a sales tax, whether they call it VAT, GST, et cetera. There's a number of different names for it. But I think most consumers understand the concept of sales tax.
But it's an import tax, right? Mm-hmm. Version of sales tax, essentially, right? It's not always applied the same.
No, it's
as it would be at the counter if you were to go buy something in Australia and you pay GST. The way it might get calculated coming into Australia could be slightly different.
Yes, really, it's more about what it applies to,
right?
Because in that previous example of the olden days when a business would bring the goods in, they take care of all of that, and then by the time it got sold to someone in a retail store, it's tax on the goods. But the cost of getting those goods to that store and all of that were already taken care of. On a cross-border move, though, you've got a customer paying for the cross-border shipping, and there will be duty assessed, and then you've also got the value of the product. In most countries, the tax is applied to all 3 of those. So the tax will be applied to the product, the transportation costs, as well as to the duty that was applied to the product and the transportation costs.
That's a lot of tax.
It's a lot, yeah.
Okay, so now duty. What makes up duty? What is duty?
So duty, going back to good jokes that we talked about earlier, tariffs is another way you can describe them. But it's when goods come into a country will often look at the types of products coming in and want to apply it. It's kind of like a tax, but it's really they'll levy a tariff based on the type of goods they are, and a lot of that has to do with their own economy and their market and the things they're trying to protect. And so some things might be really, really high percentages, and some might be completely duty free. And every country is a little different. And that's where, not to go too deep into it, but that's where, if you've heard the terms HS codes, that classifies products on the type of goods they are, which also is then you can look up what the duty rate would be for a particular product.
So who's deciding what these tariffs are, right? Because it's a tariff.
Mm-hmm. Each country.
Every country, legislatures.
Yep.
Or, maybe it's not so democratic, So somebody's making a decision that, so why are they charging duty? Like why not just have it be zero?
I'm sure there's some people who think that might be a good idea to do that. And a lot of it is protecting industries within your country, being one, trying to make sure that your local businesses can be cost competitive with international businesses. I think that's probably one of the biggest driving factors of that.
Or to possibly even penalize the other state, right? Like if you just don't like them, whatever, you're upset.
We definitely have examples of that as well.
Yes. So, this goes back as far as ancient Greece and the Roman Empire, where tariffs were used in city-states as, goods were moving between, the Greeks and the Romans. So it's been around a long time, continues today. And, sometimes you'll see things that are zero duty, and other times you'll see things that are, 100% plus duty, right? If it's, especially if someone's trying to really protect an industry and it's based on the country of origin too, right? It's not necessarily based on where it's coming from. So it's, what's the tariff on this good made in this country? Would that be accurate?
Yep.
Why do fees matter here?
Great question. They matter a lot.
Like what is fee? Yeah. What?
There's a lot of buckets for fees. Fees can be levied by the country for just import fees. If there's special kind of products that need licensing, there can be fees associated with that. And then you've got the fees for your broker or carrier that's doing the work to process the clearance of those goods, and they'll charge fees.
Wait, I thought in e-commerce it was brokers inclusive on the air shipments with UPS, FedEx, and DHL.
Yes, that's true. Asterisk. There are many other fees. So let's say it is inclusive for certain types of shipments, but if your shipment has tons of items on it, they can start charging extra for each line item over a certain amount of lines. So
line items on the commercial invoice go over 5, for instance, which is a kind of common example.
That's a common example.
You go over 5 line items. They're like, look, now I take extra effort on the shipment, so we're going to charge you $1 per line.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Yep. And then you've got your disbursement fees. That's a common term. I've heard it called disbursement, deferment, advancement, et cetera. Yeah. There's a number of different terms for the same concept, which is, hey, they're gonna facilitate that payment of the duty and tax to the local government, and they usually have to outlay the money first and then turn around and go collect it. And so they'll add a fee in for that as well.
So do you think you could categorize these fees into 2 high-level buckets? One is what the governmental type fees are. So like an agricultural fee maybe that's on a shipment going into New Zealand, right? That's going to be charged by it's government, state level. And then you have the carrier broker level, which I'll probably for e-commerce mix together, because a lot of times the carrier is the broker, or they're the ones that are abstracting the importer from the broker and just kind of like combining it all with the fees. Would that be?
Yep.
Okay.
Those are at the highest level possible. That'd be the 2 buckets.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now that we understand what landed cost is at a high level, let's talk about maybe the collection. I mean, why is this important? How does this apply to e-commerce? I mean, what?
Honestly, I think it comes down to experience, right? Like an e-commerce retailer is in the business of selling goods to customers, and they want them to be happy, and they want them to stay happy and come back and buy more.
So what's the experience today? Someone in Canada buys something, ships UPS ground into Canada, and it's $100 item. What is that experience going to look like? Or FedEx ground,
So if that retailer just says, hey, I want to start selling into Canada, and I've got great ground rates with my carrier, I'm going to just
Great ground rates might be for let's say, a 2-pound package,
Sure.
20 something bucks, something
Sure.
like that,
Sure.
like low 20s maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If they send it ground, what's going to happen is that shopper's going to check out, and then often these retailers might, if they're savvy and know a lot, they might even put a disclaimer saying, "Hey, shopper, it's on you." You're paying.
I've seen those warnings.
They're out there. The shopper thinks they get a great deal. That package clears customs. That package then gets duty and tax assessed, maybe some other fees from the government. Then there'll be brokerage charges added to that, and the disbursement and advancement fees and any other fees that are required by the carrier. And then when they go to the doorstep, or before they will deliver that, they'll reach out and tell that shopper, hey, if you want your goods, you need to pay X amount, which is usually way more. So
let's say the shopper paid $50 at checkout and $20 in shipping. Okay. Mm-hmm. And now they're getting surprised. What is way more? Like, I mean, come on, how much more can it be? Well, I mean, they paid $70 already. How much
in your example, that brokerage fee alone is going to be more than any of the duty and tax. We're probably talking, I'm guessing off the top of my head. Let's say $30 at least
in just fees.
And fees, and then the duty and tax are going to be pretty minimal on that. In fact, there would be no duty.
I think 30 might be low, right? Yeah. I mean, the tax is going to be pretty low. I mean, 5% GST, depending on what province you're going to. So let's say you get up to around 10%,
and there would be no duty on that one.
So $5. Yeah, $5 in tax, no duty. It's under the duty de minimis. It's over the courier de minimis. So now there it's above that 40 that we talked about last week. So now it's going to get hit.
Yep.
So to collect $5 in duty and taxes, they're going to charge about $35 in fees.
Yeah,
that's absurd. We should stop this podcast right now. Yeah. We need to go become lobbyists.
Well, hold
maybe. Oh no, that wouldn't really fix this, would it? Oh man. Okay.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. We're just talking about now. Yeah, let's talk about the experience of the retailer, and then let's talk about the experience of the shopper. So for the shopper, the retailer's like, "Oh, sweet, I'm done. Shopper, it's on you." Right?
That was easy.
They think they've washed their hands of it. Well, when that shopper gets the bill, they go, nah, I'm not paying this. I already paid $70. Forget that. Guess what they can do? They can tell the carrier, I don't want it. I'm going to refuse the shipment.
Well, then they're going to be out their money.
Will they though? These credit card companies are pretty good at taking care of their customers, right? So they can do a chargeback, and it just turns into a whole fiasco of now the shopper will get with their credit card company and try to do a chargeback, which is really expensive for the retailer and just time consuming and painful for everyone involved.
So the retailer loses their $70.
Yep.
And why did and honestly, I mean, the shopper's winning this chargeback because it didn't even get delivered. I mean, It made it to customs. Right. So when all they need to do is claim non-delivery.
Yeah.
And they'll
peasy,
win
right?
every time.
Yep. And then the retailer, don't forget about this. This retailer also has a package that's stuck in another country.
That's worth money.
And so they've got to decide what to do with it. Now, in this case, they're probably just going to abandon it because the return shipping is going to be way more than the shipping going out. And so it just turns into a mess. And then guess what this retailer also has? Or actually, I should say, guess what they don't have?
What?
A future customer. Because that customer is never coming back.
Yeah. No, that's... And oftentimes then these customers, as you've seen the stats, if they don't know what the duty and tax is going to be, they're not a future customer for anyone that is not offering duties and taxes at time of checkout, because they've now been, they learned the hard way. And so they're going to avoid retailers that aren't offering the ability to pay that duty and tax at time of checkout. So,
yeah. If they see a site like that again, no matter who it is, they're never going to buy again.
So I want to get that in a minute, but I still want to talk about that shopper experience and how poor it was. Even when they do pay, right? Like how do they pay? Like this is really sophisticated, right? There's like Apple Pay, just online, just quick.
It depends, right? Like who's collecting? Every carrier's kind of got their own systems that they're trying to collect. Some of it could be just showing up at the doorstep and needing cash. It all depends on the country it's going to and who's trying to collect.
But if you're needing cash, that would be just like a, remote like countries, smaller countries that are unsophisticated, right? That are actually collecting cash at the door. I actually think the United States Postal Service does this on stuff coming into the United States. There's
a high de minimis,
$800. No wonder they haven't built anything around this because it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
But when it does happen, the delivery driver is going to, walk up to the doorstep and knock and say, you owe me some money, like literal money. Can you give me some dollars?
Well, and you talk about just the delivery experience. Even if the shopper knew that they were going to have all of these duty and tax and they could calculate it perfectly and they knew exactly what the cost was going to be. Just the delivery experience is way more painful than it used to be because a lot of times they might even the shopper might have to go and collect their package and pay at a post office or, some other collection facility, depending on who the courier is. And it's just clunky and difficult and painful. And guess what? Even if they knew what it was and later on they decided, I actually don't want that anymore, they could still refuse it. Yeah,
they can still refuse. I mean, they're getting it. It's also delivered slower typically because it's being held up while this is happening. But there is a term for when the duty and tax is collected upon delivery. What is that?
So this is where the world of e-commerce and your typical cross-border space uses terms interchangeably, but they don't always mean exactly the same thing. But when it is collected upon delivery, DDU is kind of the old school term that's been around. DAP is
what are these abbreviations here?
Delivery duty unpaid, or DAP is delivered at place.
Delivered at place.
That one is, yeah. And then, but really it's, hey, you know what? This comes back to you go back in history of who's responsible for the shipment at what point in time in the transaction. Is it when it leaves my shores going to you, or is it when it hits your shores? And then, as two businesses working together to come up with an agreement on where that responsibility changes hands. And in e-commerce, we use a lot of the same terms, but they're just, they may not be exactly the same thing, but they're really talking more about the experience. So when you talk DDU or DAP, it's, hey, shopper, you're paying it when it gets to you.
So if you're talking to a customs broker and you're saying, hey, I'm going to ship this e-commerce shipment DDU, they might be like, I don't know if that's the right terminology for this, but it's a loosely used term in the industry to kind of describe the experience. Otherwise, each carrier might have their own kind of description of it. Free domiciles one I hear. Duties and taxes, paid by the receiver or consignee. So it's not really consistent across the the industry how it's described. But except when everybody gets in a conversation, DDU is kind of the one that just pops up.
Yep. No, that's just the one that everyone knows. And then on the flip side, the term DDP is that it's all paid when it's all done. When the transaction's complete at the time of purchase, the seller's the one taking on the responsibility to make sure that's all paid. Now, normally outside of e-commerce, the seller's the one actually arranging for the import and clearance and taking care of all of that. And in e-com, it's really more of a, hey, you pay, the carrier is still taking care of the clearance and they're billing somebody else for the duty and tax besides the recipient.
Okay, so you have a shipment that's leaving from the United States going into France and it's clearing customs. Typically, this is probably getting cleared by, the carrier or the broker. So if it's express carrier like a UPS, FedEx, or DHL, it's actually going to be them that are doing the clearance and the collection, but it's their entity in France that's doing this. This is not the export entity in the United States.
Yep.
And then you have, smaller shippers, or better said, maybe other shippers that are consolidators, that are kind of like they might partner with a broker out there that's also doing the calculation and collection. But instead of collecting that from the importer, the consignee, they're going to then have to bill that back to the United States.
Yep.
Even though the actual transaction, the collection amount is in euro in this case, right? So they're going to collect this many euros and then bill that back to the US. It's not really it's more of a billing mechanism that's occurring. It's not a service that's actually the U.S.'s, your U.S. carrier isn't actually the one doing this. It's a foreign entity.
Yep. That's exactly how it works. And of course there's costs and fees associated with that billing and everything, but it's part of the experience, right? You need to create that experience for the shopper to shield them from that. So that way it can feel as much like buying from a local e-commerce company as possible, to where that they order online, they see all the costs, they pay for it, and then it just gets delivered. And then there's a lot of mechanisms involved. What you talked about is one, and how that duty and tax gets paid is facilitated by the carrier. And then the other one is the trend over the last 5 years, which has been, certain countries are turning around and telling us as the retailers to actually remit that directly to them on low value orders. And so that's another mechanism that as a retailer, you have to know in Australia and the UK and the EU and New Zealand and Singapore and Norway. You have to know, do I need to register? And then which orders of mine do I need to collect the duty and tax on? And then every month or every quarter, you send that directly to them. The nice thing is for the carriers, they just clear it. They see your tax ID and they just clear it, and they don't have to collect anything.
This is kind of like Nexus in the US, right? Like when we talked a little bit about
exactly
this
like
next week,
Nexus.
last week when we spoke, but very similar to Nexus. Yep. You're having to
so at a high level,
get a tax ID and just on self-report.
Yep. So at a high level, a retailer has to know, how's this money going to be collected? Which parts am I responsible for remitting directly, and which parts should I expect a duty and tax bill? That's if I choose to actually collect landed cost at checkout, and then I gotta also actually know how to calculate it.
Well, you've done this in a previous life.
I have.
Yeah.
This goes back before the remittance stuff. The rumblings of Australia coming on board with that were happening at the time. But yeah, so I worked at a large retailer. We sold parts for vehicles, apparel, you name it, a wide range of products. So we had hundreds of thousands of SKUs. And so we had to go through classify goods, choose, and then I had to do it all on my own.
So you were coming with the classification on yourself? You were really coming up with...
I organized a whole team internally to go and classify. And we did just our top selling. So we only had to do like 30 or 40,000.
How many hours did that take you?
I don't even want to think about it. Not to mention we had to update our software to be able to store the information properly. And like it was a project, to say the least. And then we did pretty good on estimating, figuring out on all of our main countries and lanes we want to go to, what the landed cost should be, building that in. And then, of course, business changes and evolve, and you add more products, and it's a constant, process to keep it up to date, which is absolutely, painful. Which is why eventually I outsourced it to Zonos, to be honest with you, because it just didn't make sense to try to keep up with that internally. And so, that's where, then that was complex enough. And then the tax remittance stuff adds a whole nother layer of complexity to it. But it's not a voluntary thing, right? Now, all of a sudden, these governments are saying, if you're going to sell goods in our country, you have to comply and you have to pay attention to these laws. In the old days, someone said, hey, if the shopper wants to order from us and it's on them, I'll send it to you. Good luck, shopper.
Old days is like 7 years ago, right? Yeah. It worked that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's changed dramatically over the past.
Yes, it has. And so, I think it would be kind of fun too is, Clint, I'm not the only one with e-com experience. Your family has an e-com company somewhere in your family, right?
Right. Yeah. So no, my wife and oldest son basically run our a couple of e-commerce stores that we own, and it's been eye-opening. It's been look. I started Zonos before ended up with a family e-commerce business that we have here, and to see it real time is pretty fascinating, right? Like we had an order into Spain the other day, and this person couldn't find. Now, first off, the reason that they're coming to our store, because they can find this good anywhere. But the reason they're coming to ours is they said, I cannot find this anywhere else, only from you. I'm worried about how fast this is going to get to me and any problems. So they send an email, right? Because they're super concerned. And luckily, right, we have Zonos installed. And so at the time of checkout, they were able to pay all the duties and taxes included so that I know when that ships, they're going to get it in time because it's not going to get held up. They've already paid it. I'm not going to get surprised with a chargeback later. I mean, this was an expensive item that also was expensive to ship. So, but I think we have a repeat customer here, right? Like, I think they had a really good experience and they're going to want to come back versus the amount of customers that we talk to that don't get repeat customers, and it's a customer support nightmare. Now, okay, this all sounds so great, Aaron, right? Like, let's just have duty and tax at checkout. My orders are going to go through the roof. My customers are going to come back day after day, and conversion is just going to, like, is that how this works?
Absolutely, right? Well, the way I like to think of it is if you can figure that out and get it all working right, when do you want your, for you as an in an e-commerce business with your family, would you like that customer to make their buying decision at the time of checkout? Or would you like them to make that buying decision when they see what the duty and tax bill is going to be when your product's already in the other country?
Well, I mean, I think I'd like them to make that decision earlier on. However, you know what I'm worried about as an owner of an e-commerce company?
Let me guess. To start with the C?
Yes.
Conversion.
Yep.
Right?
I want them to make the purchase. And so one of the issues is, right, now showing this at checkout, and what the heck, Zonos, like you just made the cart price go from $120 with shipping, $20 shipping, about $100 item, to like $190. Like, how is that going to help me out here? Because now my shoppers, they're bailing, right? They're concerned. Now depends. I mean, I think that there's some that are, but it's true that there are tons of studies out on and surveys, right, of shoppers, and I think Canada Post had a really good one of that surveyed Canadian shoppers. It's true that they are looking for stores that don't surprise them at time of delivery, but the irony is, in reality, the application is if you don't show it at time of checkout, a lot of times you get the order because there's a lot of those buyers that either maybe they're in that camp and they do like seeing a smaller price point, or that maybe they think, oh no, maybe it just gets delivered by Canada Post. I'm not going to give it any duty and tax. I mean, there are so many reasons that as a shopper, you just like to see a lower dollar amount at checkout.
I'm one of them, right? But I also wouldn't want to be surprised. Right. Yep. Like, I want to know what the true cost is going to be. And I think you bring up a valid point that there is a conversion discussion that has to be had. Specifically, I've always looked at it. Does increasing the cost at checkout have an impact on conversion? Well, it's definitely going to have an impact on the decision your shoppers are making, right? But I think there's two sides of that coin. There's some that might bail at that point, but they might be the ones that were going to bail and give you a chargeback and create a whole mess for you.
So if they don't like the surprise at checkout, they're not going to, you're telling me they're not
definitely not going to like it.
The surprise at the door?
Yeah, they definitely won't. And then you got the other ones that have been burned, and you're going to increase their confidence. Like, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. I'm willing to check out and move forward, whereas they may have been reluctant before.
So you're telling me I'm going to end up with the customers I don't want and losing the customers I do want.
Yeah.
Right? The ones that want to see it, they're the ones that are probably bailing. Yeah, I might be getting the ones that are so concerned about price and want to do some gambling in there, and hopefully they're thinking maybe I won't get hit with duty and tax. And when they are, maybe they don't. Either they're going to be upset, or they already know they can just do a chargeback. They're like, oh yeah, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to pay this. So
yep.
Not the right mix probably of customers that I want to get there.
So just to kind of go back to some questions on what you'd like to see with your e-com stores. Line of cost can be presented a number of different ways. If your whole site's priced with the product the same for everybody, and then when it gets to checkout, dynamically look at what's in the cart, where it's going, calculate the shipping, along with all the duty and tax fees, everything that needs to be there to check out. The experience that works great, that's dynamic, can work for any country. But is there any problems with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the benefit is exactness, right? So you can really get down to the penny, pretty close. I mean, exactness based on our, let's say Zonos' ability to calculate the duty and tax. We have all the information needed to do that calculation. However, that's not the local experience that shoppers outside the US are typically used to seeing, right? If they're buying domestically, they might be used to seeing tax, but a lot of times the tax is actually inclusive of the product. And so I think that's the evolution of being able to tailor the experience to the destination, because it does vary. What I really want is, if it's a country where it's VAT inclusive, let's say France, maybe I just want to show the VAT inclusive in my product price. So instead of them buying, let's go back to that previous example, which was a $100 order with $20 shipping. Say it's 20% VAT or so. It's actually a little higher, I think, in France. But you add into that the VAT cost, which 20%, but that's on the shipping as well. So let's say that now they're shopping and that product price is $130. And yeah, maybe they're informed of the duty, at time of checkout. But in this case, it was actually under the duty, de minimis. So I could have just showed them just the tax, right? Like, I mean, that's the ideal experience and evolution, I think, of what shoppers are looking for is something that is localized to them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think if you think of what we're doing, the old school way of DDU, the full cost of the transaction wasn't known until the goods are actually in country. Then we've evolved, and many companies have evolved to where you present that at checkout. Great. Now we're talking moving that, when applicable, when the shopper expects it, moving that to the product page.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And then there's no sticker shock at checkout. There's no sticker shock when it hits the country. And the best part is you're localizing the experience for what that shopper expects. Like if I'm in the US, I expect when I get to checkout, they're going to tack on some sales tax.
Yep.
Right. That's not foreign to me. However, I was in France. I'm used to, when I see the price of the goods, I pay it. The tax is already baked into that. And we want to make sure, I imagine for an e-commerce company, making the experience feel as domestic as possible is going to increase conversion and customer satisfaction.
As long as you can set the expectations that that's the experience they're going to get.
Yes.
Right? Because if you arrive and you're from France and you're on a US-based website, and the product price is inclusive of tax and or duty, unless you're properly informing the shopper, then now everything just looks like it costs more.
Yeah, and then they're anticipating more to be added at the checkout.
Yeah,
right.
So I think doing things like in my case, right, I have a splash that pops up, recognizes the IP of the shopper, informs them that this is sets their expectation in that country. Look, we do sell to you, and we want to be able to service you as best as possible. Here's the experience that you're going to incur on our website, and you can do that, with GeoIP recognition, modals, welcome, messages, and then also on the product page, right? Like, as they're looking at it, and then again at checkout. So I think there will still be a lot of customization that needs to occur that is going to help inform the shopper of what their experience is going to be. But it's for sure closer and closer to that domestic experience that they're used to, and just feel very familiar.
So would you say the key to success is let the shoppers know what the heck's going on, right?
Yes.
And what their experience is going to be.
Journey.
Yeah.
Yep. Time of arrival on the website, when I'm shopping and adding items to my cart, when I get to the checkout, setting my expectations. I want to know what's going on with delivery. When I get the order email confirmation, and then if I have to deal with the return or any of that, like that's what I want if I'm a shopper. Is I think shoppers do want to buy from other countries, either due to brand quality, or, like in the case I was bringing up, the lack of variety that they have in country to buy it. And they're online, right? So online, you search for something, and you don't really care if it's next door or in another country, other than the fact of the stuff you have to deal with if it's in those locations.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. I mean, what other kind of advantages or interesting topics around landed cost do you think we should talk about on the show today?
How does currency get? I just a quick. I'd love to talk a little bit about currency, because the declared value, which is what goes on a commercial invoice, is going to be in the base currency of the export country, right? So, let's say it's in U.S. dollars and it's leaving the U.S. or no, hey, I mean, this could be in yen if it's leaving from China, but when it goes into another country, that's not their currency. So how does that kind of play together, and how does it impact the calculation?
That's where it's getting an exact landed cost quote. You're here at Zonos, we deal with this all day, every day, which is, okay, we're taking an order on Tuesday that might not ship till Thursday, that it's not going to hit the country till Saturday or Monday, or heck, it could be 2 weeks from then, depending on the service that's used. And there's lots of currency and exchange rates happening. Customs is going to use theirs, and some of them will base it based on the time.
What do you mean theirs? Like their own?
Yeah, and some of them update it daily. They tell
they
all
have their own
brokers,
FX rates that they use.
And they're pinning it to usually the market, but they don't. A lot of them might only update it every month, and every broker that clears it uses that static exchange rate. And then you've got the actual currency, and when the carriers are billing the duty and tax at different places, if they're billing it to a different country, they're going to use their own exchange rate as well to convert that, whether it be euro back into USD or to CAD or wherever they may be billing it. They have their own exchange rate that's live at the time that they're processing that invoice. So it's there's a lot of exchange rates happening with that. But then just think of it in general from a retailer's perspective. If I'm selling into the EU, I know that everything under 150 euro, I'm going to remit via IOS. I'm going to remit it directly, and it's not going to be collected by the carrier. And anything over 150 euro, the carrier is going to collect.
So don't use the. Okay, so which FX rate am I going to use if it's under the de minimis, right? Am I using the customs exchange rate in that example?
I'm trying to figure out what retailers are doing in general. Like it's kind of a fuzzy math that knowing which orders should be remitted and which ones aren't.
And then different exchange rates are being used depending on if it's remitted or not, right? Because if it's over the de minimis, the exchange rate that's being used to calculate is a customs exchange rate, right?
Yeah, and I would say customs is going to look at the value of that shipment based on their exchange rate, right?
Yep.
So you're going to have times where, as a retailer, I think it's under 150 euro, and customs says no, it's over 150 euro, or vice versa. And so you have to watch. There's problems with you might remit your taxes and get a bill, and you've got to make sure you catch that and have to.
Well, yeah, when you remit it, now you're remitting it 3 months after the fact, right? Or maybe 2 months after the fact, and you're remitting it in their currency, right? So when you're doing the remittance, you're declaring, look, I sold this much. First off, you were dealing with the custom stuff, trying to calculate, everything went over de minimis. And then the ones that were under, you're having to deal with an exchange rate that is so far in the future, possibly, right? Like you're just doing your best, right? Yep.
The science is exact to a degree with a lot of subjective things happening.
So let's take out the remittance side. Now, and tell me, why would I need Zonos or any provider like this when I'm just going to get the bill back? It ships into Egypt. I get the invoice back from, let's say, DHL. I ship it DDP. I'm like, all right, here's the math. I mean, this is how much they charge in duty. This is the breakdown of their fees. Like, is it really I mean, I can get all that detail, right? Or
Oh, no. Oh, on the invoice? No. Depends on the country. So yeah, if you want to try to reverse engineer what you get back from a carrier on a duty and tax invoice, good luck. There's some that literally they dump everything into one line item and call it duty or customs fees or something else. Or they might have a couple line items. And then there's others where you can get a really detailed breakdown, but it's by no means an easy task.
And look, I mean, we deal with this every day. I mean, we're getting, thousands upon thousands of duties and tax invoices, and we're trying to reconcile what we did correctly at time of checkout with something that is many times subjective and not detailed, and trying to see, like, how did they even come up with this amount?
Yep.
And at times you have to dispute it, right? No, you did this wrong. You're doing the calculations wrong. This fee shouldn't apply. Other times you're just at the whim of the broker, and for whatever reason, how they felt that day, how they wanted to categorize a good. And so in the end, getting an exact landed cost, which is kind of where we started here, at time of checkout is it's a lot of work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
it's never, you're never going to get to the exact number. With the foreign exchange rates that's going on and everything else, there is no one-to-one until one day, right? Customs trusts and is just willing to accept what the calculation was possibly at checkout and just accept that money.
Yeah. No, for sure. And that's where, on the remittance side of things, that's pretty straightforward, right? You calculate it, you collect it, and remit it. You still got to watch for any times where there might be double taxation, but that one's really pretty straightforward. But yeah, when it comes to estimating what someone else is going to do in another country, and I've seen them do all sorts of crazy things, to where you've got to be watching your back on that a little bit, and making sure that, you're not losing money, to be honest with you. And that's where, you can play with hand grenades, and that's cool. That can work, where, hey, we're just going to get close. We're going to kind of just throw in some fuzzy math on our duty and tax and hope it all works out. Then you're always kind of looking over your shoulder, making sure that your margins are okay. When in reality, I don't know about you on your family's e-com business, but did you start that to become to sell product and grow conversion and create happy customers? Or did you want to become a duty and tax expert? I mean,
right. Yeah, no. Yeah,
like, where do you want your time to be spent?
Exactly.
Right?
I want it to be spent on satisfying our customers, giving them the products that they want to buy. Not there. Not in the nuances around, duties and taxes. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And I think that's where, I try not to put a big Zonos, pitch on this at all, but, we just see the need. Retailers, they go into business because they're passionate about their business and they want to take care of their customers. And so we want to allow them to expand their customer base to the entire world, and not be a major distraction for them from their core business. And so that's where we take on the complexities of all that, give them cost certainty of the landed cost that they can present to their customers at checkout, whether it be in the product price or at checkout, depending on the market. And we're there in their back pocket for international, so they can focus on selling to their customers, and we'll take care of the dirty business around landed cost and the complexities that go along with it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we didn't touch on last time. And, you and I can go into the weeds on this. And I do think it's really important for especially individuals that are in supply chain, kind of cross-border supply chain space, dealing with e-commerce, whether it's, anyone that's needing to service that e-commerce merchant, like, knowing this detail, I think is actually really important. But if you're talking to the e-commerce merchant, what's important is these complexities, that they can be made very, very simple for you and your shoppers, and also be transparent with how it arrived at, with calculations and everything else. So you can just have that trust that, look, our mission at Zonos is to create trust in global trade. Like, that is our mission. And as a lot of that is just being extremely transparent and trying to make sure that there's just trust that's happening between that shopper and that seller, right?
Yep.
How do you create that trust? And so much of it revolves around this subject today, which is creating a total landed cost that's inclusive of everything, where that shopper can buy from anywhere in the world, from anyone in the world, and the seller can sell to anyone in the world, and hopefully, grow their business.
Absolutely.
Well, man, we're going to have other episodes, Aaron, about so many of these other little things that we went into, because you can dive deep. But today, I mean, the goal was to be high level. And though it might not have felt high level at times, I think we did a pretty good job at, touching on a few things and then pulling out. So looking forward to our next podcast, which subject we will, we'll decide, there are so many things that we can talk about.
It really is.
So, to our listeners, we'd love to hear, if you want to hear about a certain subject, if you want to have us bring on a certain guest, leave the comments in the show notes, or, leave the comments in the, on YouTube or whatever. And, we look forward to delivering some more great cross-border nuggets the next time we talk.
Sounds good to me. Looking forward to it.